Chapter 2. The First Departure. "May I asked, my pen poised above the notepad. "Of course," he replied, settling deeper into his chair. "You have experienced the departure of the soul from your body. How long ago was this?" "This event," he began, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper, "happened to me twice." "Twice?" The word escaped me before I could stop it. "Truly?" He affirmed with a simple nod, his green eyes holding mine with unsettling intensity. "Yes." Then he elaborated, each word measured and deliberate. "The first time was 5 years ago, and the second was the year before last. My first experience is related to the time when I had just separated from my wife, 2 months after that sorrowful divorce." The weight of that word, sorrowful, hung in the air between us. Here was a man of logic and precision, yet he chose such a tender word to describe his failed marriage. It was a Tuesday, at sunset. I was in my office, arguing with the architect of one of the buildings. "The architect for the house you were building for your client?" "Yes." It was a verbal argument, but it was very intense. His jaw tightened at the memory. I had never been so angry. "What caused such rage?" "A deep-seated sensitivity I have to betrayal and theft." The engineer's hands clenched involuntarily. I had realized he was being dishonest. From every van load of cement, only a third was being used on the building. The rest he was taking to his own secret warehouse. He rose abruptly, took off his jacket, and draped it over the back of his chair, a gesture that seemed to require great effort, as if the memory itself carried physical weight. "You see, I am very serious in my work. My stomach cannot digest what is forbidden. I have never been willing to betray my clients for the sake of greater profit. For every client, I build a house as if I am building it for myself, perhaps even more carefully than if it were for myself." When he sat down again, something had shifted in his posture. The confident businessman had given way to something more vulnerable, more human. "I won't tire you with details. That evening, I berated the architect soundly and fired him. In a state of absolute fury, I got in my car and drove toward my house." "In the old house you mentioned?" "Yes." On the way, my brother called. His voice softened slightly. He wanted to consult with me about something. I told him I was heading home, and we arranged for him to come to my house in 15 minutes. "And you arrived first?" "Yes. It was summer then, the air still thick with heat, even as the sun was dying. In the middle of the courtyard, next to the pool, I had placed a large wooden bed. I used to sleep on it at night, under the stars." He paused, and for a moment his expression grew distant. "I should mention that the door to the house opened directly onto this courtyard. The bed was about 20 meters from the door, facing it directly across that empty space." "Was there light in the courtyard?" "Since darkness was approaching, I turned on the courtyard light. A single bulb that cast everything in harsh relief, creating deep shadows between the patches of yellow illumination. I sat on the bed and waited for my brother." The engineer's breathing had become more deliberate, as if he were preparing himself for what came next. "A few minutes passed. Suddenly, a wave of dizziness washed over me. Not like fatigue, but something far more profound. I felt a numbness spread from my forehead to the crown of my head, as if ice were slowly creeping through my skull. I told myself that if I lay down for a moment, I would feel better. So I reached for the pillow that was on the other side of the bed, intending to place it under my head. His hand moved unconsciously, mimicking the gesture. But my hand stopped midway. No matter how I tried, I could not move it any farther. It was as if it were locked in place, trapped in invisible amber, as if time itself had stopped. He stared at his own hand, wonder creeping into his voice. I felt a strange and delicate sensation, like being lifted by gentle hands I could not see. Of those moments, this is all I remember. "And then?" I prompted, sensing we had reached the threshold of something extraordinary. "I understood nothing more until, at some point, I heard the ringing of the house bell. Sharp and insistent, cutting through whatever strange realm I had entered. As soon as I heard the sound, I sprang up with an energy that felt both familiar and utterly foreign. I ran with impossible speed toward the door of the house." He leaned forward, his eyes intense with memory. "When I reached the door, I wanted to pull back the latch to open it, But I was not successful. My fingers passed right through the metal, not around it, not fumbling with it, but through it, as if I were made of nothing but shadows and intention. How did they pass through? Could you explain this more clearly? It was as if you were trying to move a latch with the shadow of your hand. Obviously you can't, neither could I. So for a second time, this time with more haste and growing panic, I tried to pull the latch back. But not only did I fail, my hand passed right through the door itself. A part of my arm up to my elbow was suddenly on the other side of the door. And one moment, please, engineer, I interrupted, struggling to comprehend. Tell me, what did your hand look like? Was it like your physical hand? It was like my material hand, but it possessed a special radiance, as if lit from within by soft moonlight, yet its substance was entirely different. He held up his physical hand, studying it as if comparing it to the memory. You've seen yourself in a mirror many times. The image in the mirror is exactly you. There is no difference in appearance, and yet that image is not made of the same substance as your body. It has no flesh, no skin, no bone. Its nature is different. He paused, searching for the right words. My ethereal form was something like that reflection. It seemed to be made of vapor, though it wasn't vapor. This is just the closest analogy that comes to mind. It possessed such a delicate quality that no obstacle could block its vision. I don't follow. He leaned forward and picked up a sugar cube from the bowl on the table, then covered it completely with the palm of his hand. Right now, can I see this piece of sugar? No, of course not. But if I were to place my ethereal hand over it, I could see it perfectly, as if the hand were made of clear glass. You mean the ethereal body is so delicate that one can see through it? Exactly. It exists, it has form and substance, but that substance is unlike anything in the physical world. I found myself gripping my pen tighter, anchored by its solid reality. You were saying your hand, up to the elbow, was on the other side of the door? And in those moments, and this is perhaps the strangest part, none of this created any questions in my mind. Even as I ran toward the door, I didn't ask myself why my feet weren't touching the ground. While running, I was floating about 5 centimeters above the courtyard stones. It's very strange that these impossible things didn't occupy my thoughts at all. He shook his head as if still marveling at his own lack of surprise. Yes, my arm, up to the elbow, was on the other side of the door. Involuntarily, I leaned forward, and as a result, my head also passed through the wood. I could see the alleyway completely, every detail sharp and clear, more vivid somehow than normal sight. My brother was at the door, his back to me, but I could see his face as if I were standing in front of him. Was the space of the alleyway real to you? Absolutely real, he said with unwavering conviction. The alley and everything in it was completely tangible and present. Think carefully. Did you observe anything out of the ordinary? Aside from the fact that I could see my brother's face while his back was to me, everything appeared normal. The lamppost cast its familiar circle of light. The asphalt showed its usual cracks. The walls bore their familiar stains. I even saw a small stone that had fallen by the door. I watched my brother kick it aside with obvious irritation. The engineer's voice took on an almost tender quality as he continued. At that same moment, a small bee flew toward him. He immediately pulled his body back, and with his right hand shooed the bee away, the gesture so characteristic of him, so perfectly him. Then he followed it with his gaze until the small insect disappeared among the branches of the tree in the alley. When it vanished, my brother moved toward the doorbell. With a faint voice, so quiet that only he could hear, he said, "Brother, why don't you open the door? Where are you?" In response, I called out, "I am here." But he neither heard my voice nor saw me. The loneliness in those words struck me powerfully. Here was a man watching his brother, desperate to connect, but trapped in a realm where love could not bridge the gap between worlds. I decided to get closer and tap him gently on the shoulder. At that moment, how far were you from him? As I mentioned, about 2 meters. And your feet were still not on the ground? No. I was floating a few centimeters above the surface of the alley. like a soap bubble that refused to pop. To touch your brother's shoulder, did you walk closer to him? I did not take a step, he said, after searching his memory carefully. I glided through the air. I slid through the space as if carried by invisible currents, drawing near to him without any effort of my own. And you touched his shoulder? I tried to, but my hand passed right through it, through flesh and bone and the fabric of his shirt, as if he were made of nothing but air and memory. And at that moment, my brother pressed the doorbell. The sound rang out sharp and clear, and as soon as that button was pushed, I was plunged into absolute darkness. At the same time, I felt an immense pressure on my chest and my eyes as if I were being compressed by invisible hands. His voice grew strained, reliving the sensation. It did not last long before I opened my eyes again, with tremendous difficulty, like pushing through thick curtains of lead. You found yourself lying on the bed. I was lying on the wooden bed, exactly where I had started. The courtyard light still burned, casting the same harsh shadows. I immediately stood up and walked toward the door of the house, on legs that felt both familiar and strange, solid after that ethereal floating. All the while, I knew with absolute certainty that it had been my ethereal body that had seen my brother just moments before. In any case, I opened the door and my brother came inside. Did you tell him what had happened? I did, he confirmed. I told him all the signs I had observed, the stone he kicked, the bee, the exact words he had spoken to himself. The engineer fell silent, and I could see him wrestling with something. Perhaps the memory of his brother's reaction, perhaps the weight of what he had experienced. And what did your brother say? He listened carefully to every detail I described. When I finished, he was quiet for a long time. Finally, he said, "Brother, you described everything perfectly. Everything happened exactly as you said." He paused, studying my face. "But how could you have seen these things? You were inside the house, and I was outside." The engineer's green eyes were distant. I tried to explain, but the words felt inadequate, like trying to describe color to someone who has never seen. How do you tell someone you love that you had just experienced the impossible? That you had stepped, however briefly, into a realm where the rules of the physical world no longer applied? In the end, I simply said, "I do not know how, but I saw it all." And for the first time in my life, I understood that there were mysteries in this world far greater than any engineering problem I had ever solved. The conference room fell silent except for the soft hum of the air conditioning. Outside, the ordinary world continued its ordinary business, unaware that within these walls, the boundaries between the possible and impossible had just been quietly but fundamentally shifted.